Hey, this is the Bun Mom Life with me, Jessie, and my 3 buns, Rue, Linus, and Timo. You may know us from our Instagram account, Little Loppy Rue, and we're here to share with you our journey as a bun family. Let's hop to it. Hello, everyone and every bun. Welcome to another episode of the Bun Mom Life. Thank you so much for tuning in to listen. We hope you really enjoyed last week's episode about how we brought home our first bun, Rue. We'll definitely be sharing more stories about Rue and her life as a single bun, like her journey through puberty and being a teenage bun, and all of that fun stuff in future episodes. But we really wanted to hop into the start of Linus's story first. So today, I'll be sharing about all the details of why and how we adopted our second bunny, Linus. Linus was truly such a special bunny. His personality really captured many hearts on our account, and he was adored by everyone. He was always aloof, often very confused, and he did whatever Rue did, just followed her around everywhere and tried to be brave like her to keep up with her. And he was extremely gentle and sweet. He loved getting pets more than Treatos, and he absolutely doted on Rue and spoiled her like crazy. Sadly, we lost Linus last June to a suspected brain tumor, and it really was the most heartbreaking thing that Bun Dad and I have ever experienced. I will share more about those last couple of weeks we had with him and the grief that followed, and how we worked through it and are continuing to cope with it in one of our later episodes. It's something that we didn't really ever speak about in detail on our Instagram, just because it was always very hard to talk about it. But now we feel a little bit more ready, and this podcast really allows us to have a better platform for us to really share in detail how those days were like for us, how this past year of not having Linus has been like for us. And so we'll definitely delve into that in one of our later episodes. Today, we're focusing on the days leading up to and the day of and the days immediately following us bringing Linus home. I would just like to preface this with another disclaimer that I am not an expert on all things bunny, only an expert on all or most things Rue, Linus, and Timo. So please ensure you consult with a professional and do your own research when it comes to any of the following topics that I'm about to share. What worked for our bun family may not work for yours. Also, we're not here to try to tell anyone what is the best method for anything. We're just here to share our story. Okay, so why did we decide to adopt a second bunny? When we first got Rue, we actually thought we'd only ever have one bunny. Back then, we didn't know that it was recommended for bunnies to have a friend, so having a pair never crossed our minds. And since it was our first time bringing a fur baby home as a couple, it just seemed natural for us that we should start off with one. You know, make sure we're doing it right before we take care of 2 of them. So the benefit of having Rue with us on her own first was all the bonding we were able to do with her one-on-one. She only had us, and we only had her. And because it was still in the early stages of the pandemic, we were home all the time, so she was never left home alone for too long. We didn't have to worry about her being too lonely in that aspect. Okay, this is a side story, but one thing that I do want to share just because it did impact us at that time, which was during the period of time that we had only Rue and our Instagram account was growing, I guess, relatively quickly at the start. I was pretty surprised and shocked by some of the messages and comments we would receive from strangers that were quite hurtful and frankly mean about Rue being a solo bunny. We got messages that were sometimes in full caps, looking like they were yelling at us, telling us that we were terrible bunny owners, that we were giving Rue an awful life by not giving her a bunny friend, and we even had people calling us irresponsible. I was completely thrown off at that time. And knowing how much both Bun Dad and I loved Rue and literally did everything in our power to treat her well and give her an amazing life, it really felt unjustified and unfair for people to make such harsh judgments and claims about us. At the start, I tried to address every single one of those people and would send them a message back, trying to kindly explain to them our situation. And I would usually receive no response in return. So I just wanted to say that I felt it was unfair for people to immediately judge and condemn others like this because we don't always know someone's background and situation. And just because someone has a single bunny right now doesn't mean they'll have a single bunny forever. Perhaps it isn't the right time for them just yet. I always think it's much better that a single bunny is brought into a loving home than for that bunny to be stuck in a shelter or a rescue or left behind just because someone can't bring home two bunnies at that time. In plenty of cases that I've seen, bunnies build such incredible bonds with their humans that they can be extremely happy as single buns. If they're receiving the attention and the love and the care that they need, they can be very happy as solo bunnies. Just like Rue was at the beginning when she was a single bun, she did plenty of zoomies and binkies, eating well, behaving healthily, and doing great bonding with us. So most of the times, for bunnies, having a bunny companion definitely makes them much happier and even more content. But that doesn't mean that if a bunny is a solo bun, that they must absolutely be living a sad and lonely life. That's so not the case, and is often not true. And there are those situations and scenarios where bunnies are much happier being solo buns. I've heard of those who have tried bonding their bunny with multiple different bunnies and were unsuccessful with each one. Those solo buns still live very happy and healthy lives with their forever family. So I think that yes, it's good to educate others when we feel that they may not be aware, but we should really do it in a way that is kind and empathetic, with the understanding that we don't know the full picture of that bun family. For us, we are certainly advocates for bunnies having another bunny companion, for sure, especially when we saw how Rue and Linus were together. But we also are understanding and empathetic to those who may only be able to have a solo bun for their own personal reasons that are truly, to be frank, none of anyone else's business. If the bunny is in a loving home with parents who cherish them, who are educated in bunny care, who am I to judge why they don't have another bun? I think there are other, much more important bunny-related issues in the world that we should be placing our attention on and getting worked up about. Anyways, we've mostly met super lovely, kind, and helpful people in our Instagram community, but those early days and months, we had several encounters that really were not that pleasant. Eventually, it didn't bother us much anymore. We just knew that, it's the nature of being public and being online. Despite the tones and the attitude of those people who sent us those messages and comments at that time, we didn't just brush off what they were saying and completely ignored what they were trying to say about giving Rue a partner. And even though they didn't say it in the nicest way, we did look into it and researched about it. And so when we learned about bunny pairs and bonding and the benefits of bunnies having a friend, we did really want that for Rue too. Some things that also convinced us was the knowledge that, for example, at night as we slept, Rue would still be active during parts of the night, and it would be great for her to have a friend to play with during those hours when we were sleeping and couldn't accompany her. Also, when we did have to leave or go out for a big portion of the day, our minds would often drift back to thinking about Rue and worrying about her. And we had a little pet cam at home to monitor her, and we would check in on her very, very often whenever we were out. So we felt that if she had another bunny at home, even if they were separated by a fence, it'd still be another presence and she wouldn't be by herself. We learned how having another bun friend could benefit her as well because she'd have some bun who could speak in her language, and they could communicate with each other in their own way, comfort each other, help each other, and play together. Gaining insight into all of this helped us to start considering bringing home a friend for Rue. But it was a big decision, and we needed time to really think about if it was feasible for us. It just felt like such an enormous step to bring home another furry being, having another little one that was fully dependent on us for survival. And we still felt really new to the bunny world with Rue being only about 5 months old at that time. So it definitely was intimidating for us to imagine having another bunny home. But as you'll hear later, it actually isn't much more work or resources to have 2 bunnies compared to 1, especially if they're bonded. So around 5 months of having Rue, we loved the bond that we had developed with her. She enjoyed our company and would follow us everywhere, and she'd constantly request pets. I'd be working at my vocal booth and recording projects, and suddenly I'd feel a little nudge on my derriere. Since our space is small, my little recording booth is inside of our bedroom. Bundad gets the den since he requires a lot more space for all of his camera gear and equipment. And if Rue jumped onto the bed, she'd be elevated near my butt height, and I'd be pretty close to the foot of the bed where I stood to record at my microphone, so I would sometimes just feel a little boop on my tushy, and I'd turn around, and there was sweet girl Rue, demanding that I hit pause on my recording and tend to her needs. She is, after all, queen of the house. So I'd obey, being the very devoted and obedient servant to her that I am. I'd stop and end up sitting on the edge of my bed petting her. And it did mean that I was constantly distracted and had lots of interruptions to my workflow. She didn't care at all. And you know what? Neither did I. I thoroughly enjoyed those precious moments of her and I bonding and connecting. But also, seeing her level of clinginess did make us see more how she'd probably benefit with having a friend, because that friend she'd be able to literally stick to 24/7. So Bundad and I discussed and worked out how bringing a second bunny home would pan out. We talked about what we'd need to prepare, how does bonding work, and also, of course, the topic of what we would do should the bonding fail and the two bunnies don't become friends. A ton of research was done before we started searching for bunnies. We were definitely a little nervous about it and worried about if we brought home a bunny and the bond wasn't successful, then we'd have basically two bunnies that needed to be kept separate. What would we do? Before the COVID pandemic, you were able to bring your bunny into rescues to meet different bunnies and bring them on little dates to see which one would likely be more compatible with your bun. But since the pandemic shut down everything, this was not an option for us at that time. And we knew that if we brought home a second bunny, regardless of if the bonding failed, we'd forever keep that bunny. Surrendering the bunny back to the shelter or rescue was not an option for us. Our home would be his forever home, even if he didn't bond with Rue. And that actually made us extra nervous, because we live in a small 1-bedroom plus den condo, and it's not a lot of space. If we have two unbonded bunnies, it'd be a challenge splitting our home in half for the two of them. Rue was also already fully free-roaming and had access to the entire condo, so the thought of having to limit her space by a good chunk also concerned us. Although, as you will hear about in a later episode, it has not been an issue for this past year having Rue and Timo being kept separately. And just a quick explanation, because of Timo's unstable health conditions and because we have zero neutral space in this condo at this moment, everything belongs to Rue. We haven't been able to bond Rue and Timo just yet. But we are moving to a new and bigger home either end of this year or early next year, and that's when we'll attempt the bonding again if Timo's health is stable at that time. Anyways, so back to us and the decision of adopting a second bunny. It was a lot to think about and to think through. Ultimately, when we looked at the whole picture, we knew that bringing home another bunny would be more beneficial to Rue than not, regardless of if the bonding was successful or not. Even if they couldn't bond, at least they could still see each other and smell each other through the fence, and therefore still have each other's company all the time. It would still make us feel better knowing that if we were away for the day or while we were sleeping at night, they could still just be a fence's distance apart and have each other's company that way. And later on, when we saw how they lay beside each other with the fence in between, and how now Rue and Timo do that too, we know that even with the separation, they find some sort of enjoyment or comfort with each other's presence. We hadn't fully 100% committed to adopting a second bunny just yet when I had already started casually looking around on websites of animal shelters and rescues. I wasn't sure where exactly to look, so I just Googled adopting rabbit in our area. And the site called petfinder.com popped up, which was actually super helpful. So it has a list of all the different shelters and rescues and their pets that are available for adoption, all on their website. And you can really filter it even to things like the breed, the size, gender, coat length, color, things like that if you wanted to. So we used that site and we happened to find and land on Hamilton Animal Services bunnies that were available. That's when we saw Linus. Well, actually, as you know from our last episode, Marmaduke. That was his name before we adopted him and changed it to Linus. In his photos, his fur was completely grown out, so you couldn't even see his eyes. He completely reminded me of the sheepdog Max in The Little Mermaid that belonged to Prince Eric. His fur was so long, and he was huddled in the corner of his little enclosure, and for some reason, I was just immediately drawn to him. I'll be sure to post his shelter photos in the Bun Mom Life Instagram stories so you can all see what I'm referring to. The information about him was pretty limited. His exact age wasn't known, which is pretty normal for rescues. He was just estimated to be a young adult. He was found out in the wild and brought to the shelter by a kind human who rescued him. His breed was listed as Lionhead, but we definitely think he was probably a Lionhead Angora mix just because of his immense, ever-growing fluff. Like I said, as soon as I saw his photos, I just somehow felt it deep in my heart that we needed to adopt him. It was such a strong feeling. And this happened late in the evening on a Tuesday, and I went straight to Bun Dad and said, "We have to adopt this bunny." After a short discussion, I filled out the shelter's application form. The staff would still have to review our application first and then either approve or reject our adoption request. There were a series of questions that I had to answer, including our age, whether we rent or owned our home, what type of home we lived in, if we had children in our home, did we have allergies, are there other pets in the home, type and breed and age of our other pets if we have we previously rehomed or surrendered a pet, how much did we estimate it would cost for caring for a pet in the first year, did we have a vet and what the vet or clinic's name was, what types of activities and training that we planned to do with our pet, and also who'd care for our pet if we were away from home. So a pretty thorough, detailed application form, and I really appreciate that about this shelter. I filled out everything the best I could and sent the email off at about 11:06 p.m. that night. To my surprise, I received a response from the shelter first thing in the morning at 8:54 a.m. telling us that our application was reviewed and that they felt ours would be a good home for Linus/Marmaduke. They mentioned that they always try to place their bunnies in experienced bunny homes, which I also really appreciate because bunnies are not easy pets, and they are definitely not starter pets. So Linus was to be neutered the following Monday, and we were scheduled to pick him up on Saturday, November 28th at 11 a.m. So about a week later, pretty soon. We actually had initially requested if it was possible to have more time for us in order to prepare for his arrival better and get our home ready for him. But the shelter staff said that once an application was approved, they do try to move as quickly as possible so that the animals don't need to stay at the shelter too long. It's better for their mental health and also helps to prevent the spread of diseases. We completely understood and agreed, of course. So we filled out the adoption agreement and we paid the $80 adoption fee. I don't think I mentioned in the last episode that we paid $250 for Rue when we brought her home from the breeder, and then another $400 for her spay. And this $80 adoption fee for Linus included his neuter. So as mentioned previously, you definitely save a lot of money adopting. So Linus's name, how do we think of that? We already had the name Linus in our hearts when we first saw photos of him. And it's because of me, Bun Mom. One of my favorite characters in the comic strip and later cartoon Peanuts, the one with Charlie Brown, is Linus Van Pelt, Charlie Brown's best friend and Lucy's younger brother. He's always holding his little blue blanket and sucking his thumb. And I also just loved the name Linus and felt it sounded so fitting for a lion head. Linus the lion head. Well, it's actually Linus the Lionhead Angora mix. Maybe, possibly. We don't know his exact breed for sure, but that is our best guess along with our vets. So since Linus was coming home in only a week, we jumped right into preparing for his arrival. We had to be a little creative with the small space that we have. So Rue, as we mentioned, was already fully free roaming our entire space. There was no part of the condo that wasn't hers. We didn't have an extra room that could be dedicated just to Linus while he got settled in. Our den was much, much too small. If you live in Toronto and you have been in our standard condos in the city, you know how small these dens are. And in case you're not from where we're from and you don't know what a den is in a condo here, it's usually a small room that's dedicated as a small home office, or sometimes people use it as a very tiny bedroom. And usually, although now I think it more often does have a door and a fourth wall, usually there isn't a door or a fourth wall. It's an open space. So with the limited options that we had, we decided to dedicate an area of our living room to Linus until he could be bonded with Rue and free roam with her. This way, he would still have plenty of space while Rue would still be able to free roam the entire rest of the home, running in and out of the bedroom as she pleases, which is her favorite. I feel like we broke a lot of the usual pre-bonding rules for bunnies in many ways, but we didn't really have another option, and in the end, it actually didn't matter anyway because Rue and Linus were a dream come true pair, and their bonding experience was extremely easy and smooth. They really were soulmates. And in case you're curious, we'll definitely share more about the pre-bonding rules that we broke and the entire bonding experience of Rue and Linus in a later episode. Linus's enclosed area was about 3 feet by 7 feet at that time, and we set up another large cat litter box with his own little water bowl. We took a wooden crate from IKEA and placed it on its side, put a little bed inside that we ordered on Etsy, and turned it into a rustic little hidey house. I was actually rather impressed with myself that I thought of that. We got him some chew toys and other decor as well. And one of the first customized pieces of decor we got for Linus was a beautiful macrame ornament that was designed in the shape of a lion. It's from one of our favorite shops and one of our good friends at Poppy Seed Paws. So she was actually one of the first to know that we were adopting Linus and bringing him home because we had ordered that piece before he was actually home. It was a simple little space for Linus, but it was so cozy and so warm. Bundad and I were both excited and nervous to bring Linus back, and we wondered all the time how he'd like it here, how he and Rue would be, how the bonding would go. But we were very much looking forward to having another bunny at home and a friend for Rue to be with. On Saturday, December 5th, 2020, we made the 1-hour drive to Hamilton to pick up Linus at 11 o'clock a.m. Since it was COVID times and everything was still on lockdown, there were no meet and greets or anything. We just handed our carrier to the staff, they placed Linus inside, and then handed the carrier back to us. We made our payment, and then we left the shelter. We didn't even get to actually see Linus until we were back inside the car and opened up the carrier. And the first thing we saw was fluff. Lots of fluff. We couldn't see his eyes. He was just a big ball of fluff. He had lots of litter bedding stuck to his fur, the poor guy. While we were driving, I was very gently, softly petting him every once in a while, not too much. And I did move the fur away from his eyes, and we were struck by how big and round his eyes were. They were beautiful. We did take a video of this moment of seeing his eyes in the carrier in the car, and we'll be sure to share that in our stories. Once we arrived home, we went into his area, placed the carrier down, and opened it up. He was very, very frightened, the poor baby. He was just trembling inside the carrier. After a little while, he turned, took a few tentative steps out. We weren't sure how he was able to actually see anything, but it seemed like he could. And we were surprised by how large he was when he came out. So when he was still in the carrier, we couldn't really tell his full size. When he stepped out into his area, that was when we were blown away. He looked so much bigger than Rue. Later on, we realized that it was really all the fluff. His body was actually so tiny. He was much smaller than Rue, but the poor boy hadn't had a trim in clearly a very long time. He must have felt so uncomfortable. We had him booked for a vet and grooming appointment with our primary vet the very next day. He was very timid and shy, and we made sure to give him lots of time to acquaint himself with his space and to feel that he was home and he was safe. He relaxed very quickly and knew how to use the litter box right away. So we didn't have to potty train him, he just knew. He didn't have any accidents at all. We were very interested in seeing what Rue's reaction would be to this new bunny who was suddenly in the space with her, and it was actually quite entertaining. In the beginning, she was very cautious as she approached the fence. She did her signature little robot moves where she just inches her way slowly closer and closer. When she realized it was another bunny, she got very territorial. For about a week or so, she was marking her territory with poops all along the fence. She didn't pee, thankfully, but she did poo up and down the fence to loudly proclaim to Linus that this space was hers and how dare he. Linus laid a few poops of his own to retaliate, but not nearly as many as Rue. And within no time, they were already laying beside each other with the fence in between, and Linus was already grooming Rue through the fence. Gosh, it was so cute. Now, typically with pre-bonding, you're supposed to have the bunnies separated so they can't touch each other through the fence, and that's to prevent any injuries from bites or fights that may happen. We didn't do that with Rue and Linus. We just had one fence, so they were able to touch each other through it, and we didn't need to have them further separated. Linus loved Rue from the start. They never attacked each other through the fence, so we had no issues with that. Again, they were just meant to be. And before I continue to move on, I just wanted to quickly insert what I think is an important note here. I know I always say Rue and Linus were soulmates, and I truly do believe that. They were absolutely perfect for each other and perfect together. And a lot of you know, Linus sadly passed away last year. We really do think Rue lost her soulmate. But what I've learned in this past year of grieving is that it doesn't mean she's worse off now and she'll be worse off from now on. She'll have another bestie. And yes, I said another and not a new bestie, but another bestie. Because never once in our minds did Linus ever get replaced, nor did he ever leave this family. He is still very much here, but in a different way. And now we have precious Timo too, who we really think Linus sent to us. Timo's not a replacement. That wouldn't be fair to Linus or Timo. Timo is another very welcome addition to our family. We know that some people felt like we got Timo as a replacement for Linus, and that is one of the reasons why we didn't post about him much for a while. We felt very protective of Timo already. And one day, when Rue and Timo become bonded and become besties, they'll have their own very special and unique relationship. It won't be like Rue and Linus. It doesn't have to be, and it can never be. Rue and Linus were the soulmate pair. But it doesn't mean Rue and Timo's relationship will be any less precious or any less important. Just like in our own human lives, we can have multiple relationships that are very important and precious to us. Each are unique in their own way, but one is no less cherished than the other. I'll definitely be sharing a multiple episode series on Linus's passing, the grief, and our experience in a lot of detail. I have grown a lot from that experience. I've learned a lot, and I've even gained a lot through the continual healing process. I hope that you'll join us for those episodes. Anyways, there'll be many more stories about Rue and Linus and Timo soon, so let's get back to when Linus came home. Building trust with Linus was extremely easy, surprisingly, to us. It's like he knew immediately that he was safe, that he was home. I remember sitting down beside him while he was lying down on the second or third day, and I remember he didn't even move away or try to scope me out. He just continued laying there. I reached out very slowly and began to pet him on his head. He didn't move away at all. I was stunned. Knowing a bit of his background, I didn't think he'd trust us that quickly or let us touch him so easily. It really melted our hearts. I can't remember when it was, but he even started kissing us very soon after. He was grooming our backs and our legs. It was so sweet. Linus always had so much love to give. We did lots of hand feeding with Linus like we did with Rue, and hand feeding helps so much with the bonding process. We loved to have him perch his little paws on our hands while he ate his pellets, and the way he chewed was adorable. His mouth always made this little round shape that we just thought was so cute. Linus was known as the one with the biggest heart. He'd give kisses to and befriend everything, literally everything, all the stuffies, all the pillows, the couch, the carpet, random chairs that he meets occasionally. He just gave kisses to everything. He was so gentle and so sweet. He wasn't that brave, and he was always a little confused and aloof, but that was what was so endearing about him. He always preferred pets over treats, and he did everything a lot slower compared to Rue's pace, including slowly eating his food, slowly unstacking his cups. Linus did have a few things that he was always terrified of and never got used to: vacuum monster and blender monster. These monsters were much too loud and obnoxious. Rue, after a while, became completely unfazed by either of them, while Linus always still ran to hide whenever he heard them. It could be something related to his past, we don't know, but yeah, he just never got used to those monsters. We also think that it's because Rue grew up here since she was a baby and was constantly exposed to those sounds, so she got used to it. Another thing that was so precious about Linus was he was always a very content bunny. He was a simple bun. He didn't need much to be happy or to be stimulated. He loved his area, and every night he did zoomies and binkies inside. Even sometimes with us sitting right smack in the middle of the space, he would just zoomy right around us. This is just another example of how different each bunny is. Linus was always super content being in this large enclosed area, whereas Timo now, when we had him in that same enclosed area, he would often try to escape. So that's why Timo is our beloved wild child, always has big ambitions, wants more, and he'll go for it. And we love it. We also loved exactly how Linus was. We love how each of them are so different, and we adore all of them just the way they are. We wouldn't change a thing about any of them. Linus and his sweet, aloof, loving, and gentle personality would eventually capture the heart of the bunny internet. We would often receive messages about how much people love him, how happy he makes everyone, and how he and Rue would just light up their days. If you are one of those people who sent us those messages, thank you so, so much. Thank you for joining in on their journey. Thank you for allowing us into your lives. Thank you for loving our bunnies. I can never say that enough. And for you taking the time to send us those messages and to reach out to us, it really means a lot to us. Linus's relationship with Rue was always such a joy to observe. In our next episode, I'll be sharing about their relationship in detail, how we bonded them, what the experience was like for us, and how their bond grew. I can't wait to revisit many of those special moments, and I hope you'll tune in and join us. Have a wonderful rest of the day or night wherever you are. We love you. Bye.